In the affluent suburbs of Boston, a seemingly vulnerable widow was about to confront the betrayal that would shatter her family's facade. What started as a routine return from medical tests took a shocking turn when she came face to face with an emptied safe and a daughter-in-law's cold calculation. Eleanor Blackwood wasn't your typical retiree. For over 40 years, she had spent her life navigating the cutthroat world of corporate law, known for her tactical brilliance and unflinching control over her family's legacy. When she encountered Vanessa standing unapologetically in her study, declaring, "You won't need this money where you're going," she had no idea they were both stepping into a web of family secrets that stretched back decades. Eleanor's diagnosis reversal would unleash a reckoning that would lead to painful truths about her late husband's business dealings and her own complicity. What began as a simple theft would become a journey of painful redemption. The Blackwood family would never be the same after confronting the true cost of wealth built on deception and the unexpected gift of borrowed time. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The afternoon light slanted through the windows of the black sedan as it turned into the curved driveway of Eleanor Blackwood's estate. She gazed at her home, a stately colonial with white columns and manicured hedges, with new eyes. Terminal. The word echoed in her mind, displacing the legal briefs and corporate strategies that had once occupied her thoughts. 3 to 6 months, Dr. Chen had said. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. Ms. Blackwood, we've arrived. The driver's voice pulled Eleanor from her thoughts. At 68, she'd never imagined dying like this. Not after surviving the cutthroat world of corporate law, not after weathering the loss of her husband Michael 15 years ago, and certainly not after burying her eldest son James just 2 years past. "Thank you, David," she said, working to keep her voice steady. "Please bring my bags in." The first step from the car sent pain lancing through her hip. The cancer had already begun to metastasize to her bones. Eleanor gripped David's arm tightly, allowing him to support her weight as they approached the front door. As David fumbled with the keys, Eleanor noted the unusual stillness of the house. Her housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, should have been there to greet her. The woman had worked for Eleanor for over a decade and knew she was returning from the hospital today. The door swung open to the familiar scent of lemon polish and the unfamiliar sense that something was wrong. Eleanor's attorney instincts, honed over 40 years of practice, hummed beneath her skin. The foyer looked immaculate as always, but something was off. "The bags can go in my bedroom," Eleanor instructed David. "I'll be in my study." With measured steps, Eleanor made her way down the hallway, one hand trailing along the wall for support. The weakness in her limbs was infuriating. Just a week ago, she'd been reviewing contracts, working 14-hour days. Now, crossing her own home felt like a marathon. The study door stood ajar, her first concrete confirmation that something was amiss. Eleanor always kept it closed, a habit formed from years of handling confidential documents. She pushed it open with fingertips suddenly cold. The room looked almost normal at first glance, but then she saw it. The painting of Michael that hung on the far wall was slightly askew. Behind that painting was her safe. Eleanor moved forward, her heart racing dangerously. The painting swung away at her touch, revealing the wall safe, its door hanging open, the interior empty where there should have been stacks of cash, jewelry boxes, and bearer bonds. Over $2 million in assets, gone. "Looking for something?" The voice from the doorway sent a chill down Eleanor's spine. She turned slowly, one hand still braced against the wall. Vanessa stood there, her slender frame silhouetted against the hallway light. Eleanor's daughter-in-law had always been beautiful in a sharp, calculating way. Today, she looked like a predator who had finally cornered her prey. "Where is it?" Eleanor asked, her lawyer's voice taking over, calm, authoritative. Where are the contents of my safe? Vanessa stepped into the study, closing the door behind her with a soft click. Somewhere safe. Somewhere it will actually do some good. That's theft, Eleanor said flatly. Grand theft. You could go to prison. A smile curved Vanessa's lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. I don't think so. Not under the circumstances. What circumstances would those be? The ones where you've been diagnosed with terminal cancer? Vanessa's words hung sharp as shattered glass. The ones where you have, 3 months? 4? Eleanor felt as though she'd been struck. She'd told no one about her diagnosis except her doctors and her attorney, Walter. How did you— Hospital records aren't as private as one might hope, Vanessa said with a casual shrug. I have a friend who works in billing. Return my property, Vanessa, now, before this becomes something you can't take back. Vanessa laughed, the sound brittle and cold. Take back? That's rich coming from you. Besides, you won't need this money where you're going. The words landed like a physical blow. Eleanor felt her knees give way, her weakened body betraying her. She reached for the edge of her desk but missed, her balance failing her. The fall seemed to happen in slow motion. Eleanor felt herself sliding toward the floor, her hip connecting with the hardwood in a burst of white-hot pain. She found herself staring up at Vanessa from the carpet, the indignity almost as painful as the impact. You won't get away with this, Eleanor managed, her breath coming in short gasps. I'll let myself out, Vanessa said, turning toward the door. Don't worry about calling the police. Who would believe that a dying woman with a history of mental health issues in her family wasn't simply confused about the contents of her safe? James would be ashamed of you, Eleanor said, using her son's name like a weapon. Vanessa paused, her back stiffening. Then she looked back, her expression almost pitying. James would have understood exactly why I did this. After all, he's the one who told me where to find your emergency key. With that, she was gone, her footsteps receding down the hallway. Eleanor heard the front door open and close, heard a car starting in the driveway. Alone on the floor of her study, Eleanor Blackwood, former partner at one of Boston's most prestigious law firms, widow of financial magnate Michael Blackwood, and now a woman with a death sentence hanging over. Her head reached for her phone. Every movement sent pain shooting through her hip, but she forced herself to continue. With trembling fingers, she pulled up her contacts and selected Thomas's number. Her younger son was the only person she could trust now. The phone rang 3 times before going to voicemail. Thomas, she whispered, her voice breaking despite her best efforts. I need you. Come home. Please. Eleanor ended the call and let her hand drop to the floor beside her. The afternoon sun continued to stream through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air above her. Vanessa had made a critical error if she thought Eleanor Blackwood would go quietly. Terminal diagnosis or not, she still had time. And Eleanor had always known how to make the most of limited time. Thomas's hand trembled as he knocked on his mother's front door. He'd listened to her voicemail 3 times, each replay revealing new layers of distress in her normally composed voice. The message had been uncharacteristically brief, just his name and a plea for help, which worried him more than a detailed explanation would have. When no one answered, he used his key, calling out as he entered. Mom, it's Thomas. The house felt unnaturally quiet. He checked the kitchen first, then headed toward the study, his pace quickening with each empty room. The sight of his mother on the floor sent his heart racing. Mom! He rushed to Eleanor's side, kneeling beside her. What happened? Are you hurt? Eleanor's eyes fluttered open, momentary confusion giving way to recognition. Thomas, you came. Her voice was raspy, her complexion ashen. Of course I came. He helped her to a sitting position, noticing how she winced. Should I call an ambulance? No, No more hospitals. Eleanor gripped his arm with surprising strength. Just help me to the sofa. Thomas supported her weight. As she struggled to stand, his mind racing with questions. Once she was settled on the leather sofa, he perched beside her, studying her face. She looked worse than when he'd last seen her a week ago, before her hospital stay. "Is this about your test results?" he asked gently. His mother had been vague about why she was going to the hospital, mentioning only routine tests. Eleanor's laugh was hollow. "In a manner of speaking. Did you know your sister-in-law is a thief?" "What? Vanessa?" Thomas's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" Eleanor gestured toward the open safe. $2 million. Cash, jewelry, bearer. Bonds, all gone, taken by your brother's widow. Thomas stared at the empty safe, his stomach dropping. "That's impossible. Vanessa wouldn't—" "She was here," Eleanor cut in, "standing exactly where you are now, telling me I won't need this money where I'm going. She knows about my diagnosis. Thomas. Somehow she found out before I could tell any of you." Thomas felt the blood drain from his face. "Diagnosis? Mom? What diagnosis?" Eleanor's expression softened slightly, the first crack in her composed facade. "The doctors found cancer, pancreatic, stage 4. She delivered the news with clinical detachment, as if reading from a medical chart. 3 to 6 months, that's what Dr. Chen said. Thomas felt the world tilt. His mother, the indomitable Eleanor Blackwood, dying. It seemed inconceivable. And Vanessa stealing from her in such a moment? Even more so. "I'll call the police," he said, reaching for his phone. "Not yet." Eleanor's hand stopped his. "First, I need to understand why. Why now? Why would she risk everything?" Before Thomas could respond, Eleanor's phone rang. She glanced at the screen. "It's Dr. Chen." Thomas watched as his mother answered, her lawyer's mask firmly in place. But as the conversation progressed, he witnessed something he'd never seen before. His mother rendered speechless. "Are you certain?" she finally managed. Yes, I understand. Tomorrow at 9, I'll be there." She ended the call and sat perfectly still, staring at nothing. "Mom, what is it?" Eleanor turned to him slowly, disbelief written across her features. "There was a mix-up at the lab. The patient files were switched." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "The cancer diagnosis. It wasn't mine." Thomas felt a surge of relief, so powerful it made him dizzy. "You're not dying?" "No." Eleanor's expression transformed, the shock giving way to something harder, more calculated. "I'm in remission. A small mass they've been monitoring for years, but it hasn't grown. They want to run more tests to confirm, but Dr. Chen seems confident." The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Thomas watched as his mother's legal mind began working, connecting pieces, formulating strategy. "Vanessa doesn't know," Eleanor said finally, the ghost of a smile playing at her lips. "We have to tell her," Thomas insisted. "She took that money thinking I had a death sentence," Eleanor finished for him, "and that gives me leverage." She straightened, some of her old authority returning. "No, we won't tell her. Not yet." Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, that's not right. Whatever Vanessa did, she committed a crime, Thomas, a serious one, and she did it with cold calculation." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "I want to know why. I want to know what she plans to do with my money. And most of all, I want to know why she thought she could get away with it." Thomas stood and paced the room, conflict evident in every line of his body. "This isn't like you, Mom, using your health as some kind of trap." "Isn't it?" Eleanor's voice was quiet but penetrating. "You've never seen me in a high-stakes negotiation, Thomas. Sometimes you need to let your opponent believe they have the advantage." The implied comparison between a legal negotiation and her relationship with Vanessa troubled Thomas deeply. We're talking about family. Family doesn't steal from family, Eleanor countered. Family doesn't use someone's illness against them. Thomas's phone chimed with a text message. He glanced at it, his expression clouding further. Vanessa? Eleanor asked, her perception sharp as ever. Thomas hesitated before nodding. She wants to know if I've heard from you today. What will you tell her? The truth. That you called and I came over. Thomas met his mother's gaze steadily. But I won't lie about your diagnosis if she asks. Eleanor considered this, then nodded slowly. Fair enough, but don't volunteer the information. Thomas's shoulders slumped slightly in relief. What will you do? First, I'm going to call Detective Marcus Rivera. He handled a corporate espionage case for me years ago. Discretion is his specialty. I'll report the theft, but request that he proceed carefully. And then? Eleanor's expression hardened. Then I'm going to find out what's really happening in this family. James has been gone for 2 years, yet somehow Vanessa knew exactly when to make her move. How did she know where the safe was? How did she get the combination? And why did she believe James would have approved? Thomas looked away, unable to meet his mother's penetrating gaze. You know something, Eleanor said, her voice softening. Thomas, if you have information. I don't, he said quickly. Too quickly. I think there might be more to this than simple theft. Eleanor studied her son's face for a long moment. You've always been a terrible liar, Thomas. Even as a child. Thomas sighed, running a hand through his hair. I need to go. I have papers to grade. Of course, Eleanor said, not pushing further. Thank you for coming. As Thomas reached the door, Eleanor called after him. When you see Vanessa, watch her closely. See if she seems desperate or calculated. It might tell us whether this was opportunistic or planned. Thomas paused, his hand on the doorknob. Mom, just promise me you won't do anything rash. You've just received good news about your health. Focus on that. Eleanor's smile didn't reach her eyes. I've been given borrowed time, Thomas, and I intend to use it wisely. After Thomas left, Eleanor sat alone in her study, surrounded by the evidence of Vanessa's betrayal. The empty safe seemed to mock her, a reminder of how vulnerable she'd become. But the diagnosis mix-up had changed everything. She was no longer a dying woman scrambling to put her affairs in order. She was Eleanor Blackwood, attorney at law, and someone had made the grave error of underestimating her. She picked up her phone and dialed. Detective Rivera, it's Eleanor Blackwood. I need your help with a delicate matter. Detective Marcus Rivera arrived at Eleanor's estate precisely at 9 the next morning. He hadn't changed much in the years, since she'd hired him for the corporate case. Still the same careful posture, observant eyes, and meticulously pressed suit. The only differences were the threads of gray at his temples and the detective's badge now clipped to his belt. Ms. Blackwood, he greeted her with a respectful nod. I was surprised to get your call. Eleanor led him to the study, where morning light illuminated the empty safe. Thank you for coming so quickly, Detective. You mentioned a theft. His eyes swept the room, cataloging details with professional precision. Family heirloom jewelry, cash, and bearer bonds, correct? Yes, approximately $2 million worth. Eleanor settled into her desk chair. Taken by my daughter-in-law. Rivera's eyebrows rose slightly. You're certain of that? She was here. She admitted it. Eleanor kept her voice even. What she didn't realize is that I would be reporting it. Rivera pulled out a small notebook. Why didn't she expect you to report it? Eleanor paused, weighing how much to reveal. She believed I was dying. Terminal cancer. There was a mix-up at the hospital. My results were confused with another patient's. And now? Now I'm not dying, but she doesn't know that. Rivera studied her face. Ms. Blackwood, family theft cases are complicated. Often there are underlying issues that don't emerge until we start digging. That's precisely why I called you instead of the local police. I need someone who understands nuance. Rivera nodded. Tell me about your daughter-in-law. Vanessa was married to my son James, who died 2 years ago. She was a financial analyst before she quit to care for him during his illness. Eleanor's voice remained steady. She's raising their daughter, Lucy, who's 17. Financial struggles since your son's death? Eleanor frowned. James left a reasonable insurance policy, and I've provided support. Reasonable by whose standards? Rivera asked. The question caught Eleanor off guard. Perhaps not reasonable by Vanessa's standards. And your relationship with Vanessa? Cordial, professional. Eleanor hesitated. Distant, if I'm being honest. When did you last see her before yesterday? James's birthday, 6 months ago. Eleanor reached for the framed photograph. On her desk, James, Vanessa, and Lucy at the beach taken just before his diagnosis. We had dinner, it was. I tense. As Rivera continued his questioning, Eleanor found herself drawn to the photograph. The smiles seemed forced, particularly James's. His arm around Vanessa looked stiff, performative rather than affectionate. The safe combination. Who knew it? Only myself and my attorney, Walter Simmons. Eleanor gestured to the safe, though apparently Vanessa found a way in. Rivera examined the safe. No signs of forced entry. She either had the combination or the emergency. Key, Eleanor finished. I keep it hidden in my bedroom. She claimed James told her where to find it. The doorbell rang. Eleanor checked her watch. That would be Walter. Walter Simmons entered the study moments later, his tall frame slightly stooped with age, his concern evident. Eleanor, are you all right? He stopped short at the sight of Detective Rivera. Walter, you remember Detective Rivera? Eleanor said. He's helping me with a sensitive matter. While Eleanor brought Walter up to speed, Rivera excused himself to take a call. The moment he stepped out, Walter moved closer. Your health results? What did Dr. Chen say? I'm in remission. Eleanor allowed a brief smile. It was a mix-up, Walter. I'm not dying. Relief washed over his features. Thank God. He reached for her hand, then seemed to think better of it. But Vanessa doesn't know? No, and I'd like to keep it that way for now. Walter frowned. Eleanor, using your health status as a strategic advantage seems necessary, she finished firmly. Vanessa took something from me, Walter, not just money. Walter sighed. What do you need from me? I need you to help me understand what's really happening with my family. Eleanor moved to a filing cabinet and extracted a folder, starting with James's final months. What are you looking for? Inconsistencies, things I might have missed while I was focused on his illness. She opened the folder, revealing financial statements and medical bills. James changed in that last year, became withdrawn, even hostile at times. I attributed it to his condition, but now I wonder. The study door opened. Lucy stood in the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder, her dark eyes regarding Eleanor, suspiciously. Lucy. Eleanor straightened, surprised. Shouldn't you be in school? Half day. Lucy entered cautiously, her gaze flicking to Walter and the open safe. Mom said you were sick. Eleanor chose her words carefully. I was in the hospital for tests. Lucy nodded, unconvinced. She's worried about you. Is she? Eleanor couldn't keep the edge from her voice. Lucy's eyes narrowed. What's going on? Why is the safe open? And who's the guy in the suit? Detective Rivera, Eleanor said, just as he reappeared in the doorway. He's an old friend. Lucy's gaze shifted between them, too perceptive for Eleanor's comfort. Whatever you think Mom did, you're wrong. She's not the bad guy here. After Lucy departed, Rivera turned to Eleanor. Interesting family dynamics. You have no idea, Eleanor murmured. Rivera closed his notebook. I've documented your statement about the theft. I'll begin a formal investigation, but I'll be discreet in my approach to Vanessa as requested. As Rivera prepared to leave, he paused. One more thing, Ms. Blackwood. In your experience as an attorney, what's more dangerous, an enemy who thinks they've won or one who knows they're cornered? Eleanor met his gaze steadily. The latter, of course. Keep that in mind, he advised quietly. When people feel trapped, they make desperate choices. After both men departed, Eleanor returned to the photographs of James. Her son's face stared back at her, challenging her to see what she'd missed. She remembered his last months, how he'd insisted on speaking to her alone, without Vanessa present, about something important. But his condition had deteriorated rapidly, and that conversation never happened. What were you trying to tell? Me? James? She whispered to the photograph. What did you know? Eleanor set the photo aside and turned to her computer. If she wanted answers, she needed to start at the beginning, with James's final year, his finances, and the changing dynamics of her family. The cancer diagnosis might have been a mistake, but Eleanor's determination was real. She had borrowed time now, time she intended to use uncovering the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The cafe Eleanor chose for meeting Vanessa was carefully selected, public enough to prevent a scene, but quiet enough for private conversation. Eleanor arrived early, selecting a corner table with her back to the wall, a lawyer's habit never abandoned. She watched the entrance, noting the exact moment Vanessa stepped inside, scanning the room with cautious eyes. Vanessa had always been striking, tall and poised, with dark hair and James's taste for understated elegance. Today, she wore a simple, gray blazer over a black top, professional armor for what she must suspect would be an unpleasant encounter. Eleanor. Vanessa's voice betrayed no emotion as she approached the table. I wasn't expecting to hear from you so soon. Sit down. Vanessa. Eleanor gestured to the chair opposite her. We need to talk. Vanessa hesitated before complying. How are you feeling? The question sounded genuine enough, but Eleanor caught the calculating assessment in her eyes. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As well as can be expected for someone who's been robbed by family, Eleanor kept her voice low, controlled. Vanessa didn't flinch. Is that what you call it? Robbery? What would you call emptying someone's safe without permission? Reclamation. Vanessa's chin lifted slightly. Taking back what should have been ours to begin with. Eleanor leaned forward. $2 million was never yours, Vanessa. No? Vanessa's laugh held no humor. James worked for your husband's company for 15 years. He sacrificed his health managing the Asia expansion. When he needed treatment, you controlled every penny like it was a reward for good behavior. I paid for the best specialists? You paid for the specialists you approved, Vanessa cut in. Not the treatment options James wanted to explore, not the experimental protocols that might have given him more time. Eleanor felt her composure wavering. James never mentioned. Of course he didn't. He knew how you operated. Money with strings attached. Support with conditions. Vanessa's voice remained steady, but her hands trembled slightly. Do you know what it's like watching someone you love die while the treatment that might save them sits just out of reach because his mother thinks it's unproven? The accusation hit Eleanor like a physical blow. She remembered the specialist's warnings about experimental treatments, high costs, minimal evidence, potential suffering. Had she been wrong? I did what I thought was best for James, Eleanor said finally. You did what gave you the most control, Vanessa countered. Like you always do. Eleanor studied her daughter-in-law's face, looking for signs of deception. Instead, she saw only pain and conviction. If that's how you felt, why wait until now? Why not confront me before? For Lucy's sake. Vanessa's expression softened at the mention of her daughter. She needed stability after losing her father. And then when I heard about your diagnosis, she shrugged. It seemed like justice. Justice, Eleanor repeated. Is that why Thomas helped you? The question clearly caught Vanessa off guard. Her eyes widened briefly before she regained control. What makes you think Thomas was involved? You couldn't have known where. The emergency key was hidden unless someone told you. James has been gone 2 years. Eleanor watched Vanessa's reaction carefully. Thomas visited last month. He was in my bedroom helping me move artwork. Vanessa looked away, her silence, confirming Eleanor's suspicion. Why would my son help you steal from me, Vanessa? After a long pause, Vanessa met her gaze again. Because he promised James he would take care of us, and because he knows what the money was really for. Which is what exactly? Lucy's future. The art program in New York that she's dreamed of. The one you promised to fund before James died. Vanessa's voice hardened. The one you conveniently forgot about after the funeral. Eleanor felt a chill. Had she made such a promise? There had been so many conversations during James's illness, so many assurances made to ease his mind. I don't recall. Of course, you don't. Vanessa's smile was bitter. Selective memory is your specialty, Eleanor. A sharp pain shot through Eleanor's chest, causing her to wince. Not her heart, her cancer site. Phantom pain, according to Dr. Chen, common in patients who'd anticipated worse symptoms. Vanessa noticed immediately. Are you all right? Fine, Eleanor managed, taking a careful breath. Just a reminder of my situation. Guilt flickered across Vanessa's face. I never wished the cancer on you, Eleanor. When I heard, it seemed like the universe balancing accounts. By giving you permission to steal? By giving Lucy what her father wanted for her. Vanessa leaned forward. Before you go to the police, and I assume you will, ask yourself what James would want. Not for me, but for his daughter. Eleanor was formulating a response when her phone buzzed. A text from Lucy. Found something on Dad's old laptop. Need to talk. Important. Problems? Vanessa asked, noting Eleanor's expression. Lucy's been going through James's things, Eleanor said carefully. Something like alarm flashed in Vanessa's eyes. What things? His laptop, apparently. Vanessa stood abruptly. I should go. Lucy doesn't know I'm meeting you. Running away, Vanessa? That's not like you. Neither is theft, according to you. Vanessa gathered her purse. Yet here we are. As she turned to leave, Eleanor called after her. One more thing. How did Thomas help you with the safe? Vanessa paused, then turned back. He didn't give me the combination, if that's what you're asking. She hesitated. He told me about the key, and that he wouldn't stop me. Why would he do that? A strange expression crossed Vanessa's face, part pity, part anger. Because he was there, Eleanor. At the hospital during James's last week. He heard what his brother said about you. With that, Vanessa walked away, leaving Eleanor alone with a growing sense of unease. What exactly had James said in those final days? And what had Lucy found on the laptop? Eleanor paid the bill and headed home, her mind racing. If Thomas had helped Vanessa, that changed everything. Her own son betraying her, it was almost unthinkable. Yet it aligned with his awkward behavior when she'd told him about the theft. At home, Eleanor headed straight to her computer. She needed to see the emails Lucy had found before confronting Thomas. As she logged into her account, a new message appeared from him. "We need to talk. I'm coming over tonight." Eleanor was about to reply when she noticed an older email she'd overlooked, sent from James's account 6 months after his death. The subject line read simply, "When the time comes." Her hand trembled as she clicked it open. Inside was a single line of text and an attachment. "Mom, I set this to send if I didn't stop it within a year. You should know the truth about Dad's business. See attached." The attachment was a folder of documents, financial records, emails, and photographs. As Eleanor began scrolling through them, her blood ran cold. There, in black and white, was evidence that her husband Michael's fortune, the very money she'd built her life upon, had origins far darker than she'd ever imagined. "Oh, Michael," she whispered, "what did you do?" She was still reading when her doorbell rang. Eleanor closed the laptop, her attorney's instinct for self-preservation kicking in. Before confronting Thomas or responding to Lucy, she needed to understand exactly what James had discovered about the family money and why he'd kept it secret until after his death. Eleanor opened her front door to find Thomas standing there, his normally warm eyes shadowed with apprehension. He looked like he hadn't slept, his university lanyard still hanging from his neck. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. No embrace, no pleasantries. Thomas followed her to the study, his gaze immediately drawn to the still-open safe. "You called Detective Rivera." It wasn't a question. Eleanor settled into her chair. "Did you expect me not to?" "I hoped you might wait." He remained standing, hands in his pockets. "Until we could talk. About how you helped Vanessa steal from me." Eleanor kept her voice level, hiding the hurt beneath practiced composure. Thomas flinched. "I didn't help her steal. You told her where to find my emergency key. You knew what she planned to do and you didn't stop her." Eleanor leaned forward. "In the eyes of the law, that makes you an accessory. Is that how you see this? As a legal matter?" Thomas paced the room. "Not as a family trying to heal?" "Theft isn't healing, Thomas. It's a crime." He stopped at the window, staring out at the manicured gardens. "I made a promise," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "To whom?" "To James." Thomas turned to face her. "Before he died." Eleanor felt her chest tighten. "What kind of promise?" "To make things right." Thomas sank into the chair opposite her desk. "He made me swear, Mom." His exact words were, "Promise me you'll make things right with what Mom did." A memory surfaced. James in his hospital bed, skin yellowed from liver failure, eyes burning with an intensity that had frightened her. He'd asked to speak with Thomas alone. She'd assumed it was brotherly affection. Now she wondered, "What did he think I did, Thomas?" Thomas looked at her directly. He found documents in Dad's old files about where the money came from. Eleanor's fingers curled around the arms of her chair. Vanessa mentioned the laptop. What exactly did James find? Evidence that Dad's company laundered money for criminal organizations in the 80s, that the seed capital for the empire came from helping cartels move cash through legitimate businesses. Thomas's words tumbled out. James discovered it when he was working on the company history. He confronted Dad 6 months before his death. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. Michael had been a brilliant businessman, building a financial services company from nothing into a multinational corporation. "I never knew," she whispered. Thomas's gaze hardened. "James didn't believe that. He said you were too smart, too involved not to have suspected. That you chose to look away. That's not fair. Isn't it?" Thomas stood again. "You were Dad's attorney before you married him. You structured the original holding companies. Your signature is on the incorporation documents for the shell corporations that moved the money. Eleanor's mind raced back 35 years. Late nights preparing documents, the exotic offshore jurisdictions, the unusual fee structures. Had she known? Had she suspected and buried those suspicions beneath ambition? I was young, she said finally, eager to prove myself. Michael presented everything as legitimate tax planning. James found your notes, Thomas continued relentlessly. Handwritten concerns about certain clients, questions about source of funds. A crack appeared in Eleanor's carefully constructed memory. She remembered writing those notes, remembered bringing them to Michael, remembered his reassurances and her choice to believe him. Why didn't James come to me directly? He tried. Thomas's voice caught. The night before his condition worsened. But you were in New York, closing the Pritchard acquisition. The memory hit Eleanor like physical pain. She'd missed James's call that night, had told herself the business meeting couldn't wait, that she'd see her son the next day. By then, James had slipped into a coma from which he never fully emerged. I didn't know, she repeated, but the words sounded hollow even to her. Thomas moved to the bar cart, pouring himself a drink with shaking hands. After James died, Vanessa found his research. She was going to go public. I convinced her to wait. Why? For Lucy's sake, and I thought you deserved the chance to make it right yourself. The pieces fell into place. So when Vanessa heard about my diagnosis, she saw it as her last chance. The money rightfully belonged to James. She reasoned. Now it would go to his daughter. The art program Lucy wants to attend. James promised her. Thomas nodded. It was the last thing he told Lucy. That she should pursue her photography, that he'd made sure she could afford the best education. A promise he expected me to keep, Eleanor murmured. A promise he assumed you'd ignore once he was gone. Thomas set his glass down. He didn't trust you, Mom. Not at the end. The words cut deeper than Eleanor had imagined possible. The idea that her own son had died mistrusting her was almost unbearable. Thomas's expression softened. He loved you. He was just angry. About the money. About Dad's legacy. Eleanor stood, needing to move, to think. And you? Do you trust me, Thomas? I want to. His honesty was painful, but I helped Vanessa because part of me believes James was right. That you would protect yourself and the family name above all else. Eleanor's phone rang. Dr. Chen's name flashed on the screen. I should take this, she said, grateful for the interruption. As she spoke with her doctor, Eleanor watched Thomas examining the family photographs. There was genuine love in the way he traced the frame holding James's college graduation picture. Everything okay? Thomas asked as she ended the call. Dr. Chen is concerned about my stress levels affecting my recovery. Thomas's brow furrowed. Recovery? I thought... The diagnosis was wrong, Thomas. I'm not dying. I have a treatable condition that's currently in remission. His expression moved from confusion to realization. Does Vanessa know? No, and I'd prefer to keep it that way for now. Thomas ran a hand through his hair. This changes everything. Does it? Eleanor moved to stand beside him, both looking at James's photograph. The money is still gone, the family secrets are still exposed, and your brother is still dead, possibly believing the worst of me. What will you do now? Eleanor considered. The question. Detective Rivera was investigating. She could press charges, see Vanessa and possibly Thomas prosecuted. She could reclaim what remained of the money, protect what was left of the family reputation. Or she could face the truth James had tried to show her. About Michael's business, about her own complicity, about the real cost of the fortune she'd guarded so carefully. I need to see what's on that laptop, she said finally. All of it. Detective Rivera sat across from Eleanor in her study, his expression unusually grave. 3 days had passed since her confrontation with Thomas. 3 days of examining James's files and discovering just how deeply the Blackwood fortune was tainted. "I've completed my preliminary investigation," Rivera said, opening a slim folder. "There are financial irregularities you should be aware of." Eleanor nodded, already anticipating what he'd found. "You've traced the missing assets?" "Some." Rivera placed a document on the desk between them. "Ms. Blackwood, did you know your daughter-in-law has been making rather significant payments to an art academy in New York?" "Lucy's program," Eleanor murmured. "James promised her." Rivera's eyebrow rose slightly. "There's more. While investigating the theft, I found financial records suggesting unusual activity in your late husband's business. Large sums moving through offshore accounts shortly before his death." "Detective," Eleanor said carefully, "may I speak frankly?" "Always. What you found are likely protective measures I undertook when Michael was facing potential legal exposure." She met his gaze steadily. "Financial maneuvers that, while ethically questionable, were designed to shield family assets." Rivera studied her for a long moment. "Ms. Blackwood, are you confessing to financial impropriety?" "I'm providing context." Eleanor's voice remained measured. "Context that might help you understand why my daughter-in-law felt entitled to take what she did." Before Rivera could respond, Walter arrived, looking distressed. He nodded to Rivera before turning to Eleanor. "I came as soon as I got your message. Is everything all right?" "Show him, Detective," Eleanor said. Rivera hesitated, then slid the folder toward Walter, who scanned its contents with growing alarm. "Eleanor, this implicates you in—" "I know exactly what it implicates me in, Walter." Eleanor rose from her desk, moving to the window. "What I need to know is, did you know about Michael's business practices?" Walter's silence was answer enough. "You were our attorney for 30 years, Eleanor continued. "Did you help Michael hide the truth from me, or did you assume I already knew?" Walter removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Michael swore the initial funding was legitimate. By the time I suspected otherwise, the company was successful on its own merits." Eleanor turned back to face them both. "And you never thought to tell me?" "Michael insisted you didn't need to know, that he was protecting you." A bitter laugh escaped Eleanor. "Protecting me, just as I thought I was protecting James by controlling his access to family money." She shook her head. "We've all been lying to ourselves, haven't we?" Rivera cleared his throat. "Ms. Blackwood, I should inform you that pursuing charges against Mrs. Blackwood could open this entire history to scrutiny." "I'm aware." Eleanor resumed her seat. "Which brings me to why I asked you both here. I've made a decision." Before she could continue, the doorbell rang, followed by raised voices in the foyer. Moments later, Vanessa burst into the study, followed by Lucy and a flustered Mrs. Winters. "I'm sorry, Ms. Blackwood," the housekeeper began. "They insisted—" "It's all right," Eleanor said. "They should be here for this conversation." Vanessa's eyes darted from Rivera to Walter, her posture defensive. "What's happening?" "Your grandmother's called a family meeting," Lucy said, studying the room with the keen eyes of a photographer assessing a scene. "Clearly," Eleanor gestured for them to sit. "I was just about to tell Detective Rivera and Walter my decision regarding the theft." Vanessa stiffened. "You're pressing charges." "No," Eleanor's voice was firm. "I'm not." Surprise registered on every face. "Instead, I'm proposing something else." Eleanor turned to Vanessa. "You stole from me because you believed the money should have gone to James, and through him, to Lucy. You're not entirely wrong." She reached for a folder on her desk. "This contains evidence of the origins of the Blackwood fortune. Evidence James discovered. evidence that suggests both Michael and I benefited from illegal activities. Lucy stepped forward, pulling a flash drive from her pocket. I found this too, on Dad's laptop. Eleanor took it, her hand trembling slightly. What's on it? More files and videos. Dad recorded himself before he died, talking about what he found. Lucy's voice wavered. He was really angry, Grandma. The pain of that statement washed over Eleanor. She'd lost James twice. Once to death, and again to the truth he'd discovered. I've made arrangements with Walter, Eleanor continued after a moment. The remaining family assets will be restructured. Vanessa, you and Lucy will have joint control of a new foundation, funded with what remains of the original estate. The foundation's first mission will be making restitution where possible. For Michael's business practices. Vanessa looked stunned. You're giving us the money? I'm acknowledging it was never fully mine to keep. Eleanor turned to Rivera. Detective, I'll provide a full statement about the theft, confirming it was a family matter now resolved. Rivera nodded slowly. And the financial irregularities in your husband's business? I'll face whatever consequences come. It's time this family stopped hiding from the truth. A heavy silence fell over the room, broken finally by Lucy's quiet voice. Dad would have wanted this. The truth part, I mean. She moved to stand, beside Eleanor's chair. He was so angry when he found those files, but mostly because he felt betrayed. Eleanor felt a tightness in her chest that had nothing to do with her medical condition. I betrayed him by not seeing what was happening, by choosing willful ignorance. You betrayed him by caring more about the money than about what it represented, Vanessa said, her tone lacking its usual edge. That's what he couldn't forgive. Eleanor nodded, accepting the painful truth. The irony is, I thought I was securing his future. All of your futures. At what cost? Thomas asked from the doorway, having arrived unnoticed during the confrontation. Too high a cost, Eleanor admitted. One I'm only now beginning to understand. She stood, facing her fractured family. I can't change the past. But I have borrowed time now, time I didn't expect to have. I intend to use it making amends, beginning with all of you. 1 week later, Eleanor stood in her dining room, surveying the carefully arranged table. 7 place settings, 1 for each member of their fractured circle, plus Dr. Chen and Detective Rivera as witnesses to whatever would unfold today. The formal china seemed ridiculous now, but old habits died hard. Need any help? Thomas appeared in the doorway, earlier than expected. You could open the wine, Eleanor replied. It needs to breathe. Thomas moved to the sideboard, his movements hesitant. They hadn't spoken much since his confession about helping Vanessa. Nervous? He asked. Terrified, Eleanor admitted, surprising them both with her honesty. But it's necessary. The doorbell rang. Dr. Chen arrived first, her professional demeanor softened by genuine concern. How are you feeling, Eleanor? Any symptoms returning? Just the ordinary stress of family dysfunction, Eleanor said with a wry smile. Nothing terminal. Detective Rivera arrived next, looking uncomfortable in civilian clothes rather than his usual suit. Ms. Blackwood, I've prepared the documentation you requested. Thank you. Eleanor accepted the folder he handed her, knowing it contained the official statement closing the investigation into Vanessa's theft. And the other matter? Rivera's expression turned serious. I've reviewed the evidence with the district attorney. Given the statute of limitations on most of the activities, they're more interested in cooperation than prosecution. Eleanor nodded, having expected as much. The sins of the past would require atonement, but perhaps not behind bars. Vanessa and Lucy arrived together, the tension between them palpable. Lucy clutched her camera bag like a shield, while Vanessa's eyes darted around the room, assessing potential threats. Thank you for coming, Eleanor said, gesturing toward the dining room. Walter should be here shortly. The attorney arrived moments later, completing their circle. As they took their seats, Eleanor remained standing, her hands resting lightly on the back of her chair. "I've asked you all here because it's time for honesty," she began. "No more secrets, no more lies by omission. I'll start." She looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. "I helped Michael hide money that I suspected came from illegal sources. I chose not to ask questions because I wanted the lifestyle, the security, the status his wealth provided." The admission hung in the air, its weight almost tangible. "James discovered this," she continued. "He tried to tell me, but I wasn't ready to listen. By the time I understood how important it was, he was gone." Her gaze shifted to Thomas. "He made you promise to make things right. Now I'm asking you all to help me do exactly that." Eleanor unfolded a document from Rivera's folder. "This is my proposal. The Blackwood Foundation will be established with Lucy, Thomas, and Vanessa as trustees. The foundation will have two purposes. First, to fund programs supporting ethical business education and white-collar crime prevention. Second, to provide scholarships for young artists like Lucy." Vanessa leaned forward. "You're putting us in charge? After everything?" "Especially after everything," Eleanor replied. "Who better to ensure the money does good than the people? Who recognized its tainted origins?" Thomas cleared his throat. "There's something else everyone should know." He looked at Eleanor apologetically. "James told me he believed the stress from the family's financial conflicts accelerated his illness. The constant fights about money, about control. He said it was killing him faster than the disease." Eleanor felt the words like a physical blow. "He said that?" "The night before he slipped into the coma." Thomas's voice cracked. "He said, 'Tell Mom she was right about the experimental treatments. They wouldn't have worked, but she was wrong about everything else.'" Lucy abruptly stood, her chair scraping back. "Stop it. Stop using Dad like a weapon against each other." Her hands trembled as she reached for her camera. "You're all so busy fighting over what he would have wanted that you've forgotten who he actually was." She set her camera on the table, clicking through to a series of photographs. "This is who my dad was. Not your fighter, not your villain, not your victim." The images showed James, laughing with Lucy at the beach, teaching Thomas's students, during a guest lecture, embracing Vanessa in their kitchen, studying financial documents with Eleanor. "He loved all of you," Lucy continued, her voice steadier now. "Even when he was angry, even when he felt betrayed. But you're all so determined to claim his legacy that you've forgotten his life." A heavy silence fell over the table. Dr. Chen, who had remained silent until now, spoke gently. "Family stress can indeed exacerbate physical conditions, but illness is complex. Assigning blame helps no one heal." Detective Rivera nodded. "In my experience, victims often want someone to blame, someone to punish. It rarely brings the peace they're seeking." Eleanor looked at Vanessa, truly seeing her daughter-in-law, perhaps for the first time. Not as an adversary, but as another woman who had loved and lost James. "You were right to take the money," Eleanor said quietly. "Not about how you did it, but about why. It should have gone to Lucy all along." Vanessa's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. He was so angry at the end. Not just about the money, but about feeling controlled. About never measuring up to what the Blackwood name demanded. "I know," Eleanor whispered. "I felt the same with Michael. Always trying to be worthy of what he'd built, never questioning how he built it." Walter, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. "Perhaps that's the real legacy we need to address. Not just the money, but the patterns it created." Eleanor nodded slowly. "The foundation is just the beginning. We need to change how we relate to each other." She looked around the table. if you're willing to try. Thomas raised his glass. To James. Not as we wish he'd been, but as he was. They drank in silence, a fragile moment of unity in a family long fractured by secrets and control. What happens now? Lucy asked, her photographer's eye capturing the tentative peace forming around the table. Now, Eleanor said, we begin the hard work of truth, together. 6 weeks after the family meeting that had laid bare generations of secrets, Eleanor Blackwood sat across from her daughter-in-law in the newly established Blackwood Foundation office. The space, neutral territory in a downtown building rather than Eleanor's home, had been Walter's suggestion. A fresh start needs fresh ground, he'd said, and for once, Eleanor had ceded control without argument. She watched Vanessa review financial projections with the precision that had once made her a promising analyst before James's illness had derailed her career. The younger woman's dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, her posture professional but guarded, as if expecting criticism at any moment. Old habits died hard on both sides. The scholarship fund is taking shape, Vanessa said, sliding a folder across the polished oak desk. We've partnered with 3 art schools so far. Lucy's program will be the flagship, but we're expanding to include music and theater studies. Eleanor nodded, leafing through the meticulously organized proposals. Vanessa's financial acumen remained sharp, despite years away from the professional world. These projections are impressive, conservative, but sustainable. I didn't want to overreach, Vanessa replied, the unspoken meaning clear, unlike the Blackwood business practices of old. Eleanor noted how carefully they still moved around each other, like dancers learning unfamiliar steps to music neither quite heard. The civility between them remained brittle, could fracture with a single misstep. Yet it was progress from the cold hatred that had characterized their relationship just weeks before. Walter's finished restructuring the trust, Eleanor said, opening her own folder. The oversight committee structure will prevent any single person from controlling the funds. Decisions require majority approval from the board. Like you did, Vanessa observed, the words more factual than accusatory now. Like I did, Eleanor agreed, meeting her daughter-in-law's gaze directly. Old habits die hard, but they do die. She paused, then added something that would have been unthinkable months earlier. You were right about that, Vanessa. About many things. A flicker of surprise crossed Vanessa's face, quickly masked by professional composure. She wasn't ready to fully accept Eleanor's evolving contrition, not yet. Trust would take longer to rebuild than financial structures. The door opened as Thomas arrived, carrying a cardboard tray with 3 coffees, a peace offering, a ritual, a bridge between worlds. These weekly meetings had become their tentative rhythm, awkward at first, but gradually finding structure amid the emotional debris of their shared past. Sorry I'm late, he said, distributing the drinks. Faculty meeting ran over. Eleanor noticed small changes in her younger son, his shoulders straighter, his tendency to hunch an apology less pronounced. The conflict avoidance that had defined him was slowly being replaced by something sturdier. Detective Rivera called while I was on my way, Thomas announced, settling into the chair beside Vanessa. The DA's office has formally declined to pursue charges related to Dad's business activities. They're satisfied with the restitution plan and the Foundation's focus on financial ethics education. Relief washed over Eleanor's face. The specter of criminal prosecution had lingered despite Rivera's assurances. Their family name would still carry the taint of scandal, Michael Blackwood's financial empire now publicly linked to money laundering and tax evasion. But they would not face court proceedings or worse. That's one burden lifted, Eleanor said quietly. Speaking of lifting burdens, Thomas said, sipping his coffee, I've started therapy. To address the conflict avoidance you both keep mentioning. This announcement, delivered with careful casualness, represented a seismic shift for Thomas. The Blackwood family had always handled its problems internally, privacy valued above healing, appearance above authenticity. Vanessa's lips quirked in the ghost of a smile. "How's that going?" "Terribly," Thomas replied with unexpected humor. "I apparently have issues stretching back to childhood. Being the good son while James took all the risks has left me with quite the complex." He glanced at Eleanor. "No offense, Mom." "Plenty taken," she replied dryly, this new honesty between them still strange but increasingly comfortable. "Though I would argue that being the good son and taking risks aren't mutually exclusive concepts." "That's what my therapist said. Right before suggesting I might consider why I let Vanessa into the safe but didn't have the courage to tell you directly what was happening." His voice held no accusation, merely thoughtful recognition of his own patterns. An awkward silence fell, the mention of the theft still sensitive territory. The agreement they'd reached, the restructuring of family assets, the creation of the foundation, had addressed the practical consequences, but not the emotional breach of trust. The office phone rang, breaking the tension. Vanessa answered, her expression shifting as she listened. "Yes, she's here. I'll tell her." She hung up, turning to Eleanor. "That was Lucy. She wants us all at the house this evening. Something about her photography project." Eleanor checked her watch. "I have an appointment with Dr. Chen first. Final clearance, hopefully." "Good news to share at dinner, then," Thomas said, the tentative optimism in his voice reflecting their collective state, healing but fragile. Dr. Chen's office felt different now that Eleanor wasn't facing a death sentence. The artwork on the walls, the comfortable chairs, the gentle lighting, all designed to soften terrible news, now simply seemed pleasant, even welcoming. Eleanor sat across from the oncologist who had delivered both her false terminal diagnosis and her reprieve, marveling at how that mistake had irrevocably altered the course of her life. "Blood work looks excellent," Dr. Chen said, reviewing her chart with characteristic thoroughness. "The mass remains stable, showing no signs of growth." "I'd say you're officially in remission, Eleanor." "Thank you." Eleanor found herself unexpectedly emotional, her usual composure wavering. "For everything, including the misdiagnosis, oddly enough." Dr. Chen looked up, surprised. "That's not a reaction I typically hear from patients." "That borrowed time changed everything," Eleanor explained, choosing her words carefully. "Without it, I'd never have discovered what was happening in my family, never have faced the truth about Michael's business, about my relationship with James." She straightened slightly. "Never understood what control had cost me." "Sometimes it takes confronting our mortality to reassess our lives," Dr. Chen observed, her expression thoughtful. "Though I still apologize for the laboratory error." "Don't." Eleanor's voice was firm. "It was the wake-up call I needed." She gathered her belongings, suddenly eager to leave. Not out of discomfort, but from a desire to move forward. "I have a family dinner to attend, something I'd have taken for granted before." Dr. Chen walked her to the door, her hand briefly touching Eleanor's arm. "The paradox of serious illness, even when misdiagnosed, is that it clarifies what matters. Use that clarity, Eleanor." "I intend to," she replied, the words a promise to herself as much as to the doctor. Arstada Khan's Eleanor arrived at her home to find Walter already there, helping Thomas set the table. The attorney had gradually shifted from professional advisor to something more personal. Not quite family, not quite friend, but essential nonetheless. His silver hair caught the light as he positioned water glasses with precision. "Eleanor," he greeted her warmly, his eyes evaluating her expression with practiced care. "Good news from Dr. Chen?" "Clean bill of health," she confirmed, hanging her coat in the foyer. "Official remission." Walter's smile contained genuine relief. "That calls for celebration." He gestured to an open bottle of champagne chilling in an ice bucket. I took the liberty. The doorbell rang before Eleanor could respond. She opened it to find Lucy standing there, camera bag slung over her shoulder, Vanessa following behind with a large portfolio case. "Everyone's here," Lucy said, sounding nervous yet determined. "Good. I need to show you something." At 17, Lucy had always possessed her father's intense gaze and her mother's sharp intelligence. But in recent weeks, she had begun developing her own distinct presence, less angry, more focused, channeling her pain into her photography rather than directing it at her family. They gathered in the living room as Lucy set up her project, a series of large framed photographs arranged in sequence. Thomas helped her position them on easels, while Vanessa hovered nearby, her expression suggesting she'd already seen them, and remained unsure about their public unveiling. "It's called Family Secrets," Lucy explained, stepping back to allow them full view. "For my senior showcase at school." Eleanor felt her chest tighten as the images appeared in sequence. The first showed her safe, door hanging open, the emptiness inside captured in stark black and white, a void where security had once resided. The next, Thomas standing at his classroom window, his reflection revealing two distinct expressions: loyalty and doubt superimposed on each other. The third photograph showed Vanessa sitting amid financial papers, her face bearing the weight of single motherhood and lingering grief, yet with a determination that Eleanor had never fully appreciated before this moment. The most difficult photograph showed Eleanor herself, captured unawares at her desk, examining old photographs of James. The camera had somehow caught her expression at a moment of raw self-recognition, the precise instant she had begun to understand her own complicity in the family's dysfunction. Lucy had titled it simply, "Reckoning." "Lucy," Vanessa began, her tone cautious, "these are rather personal." "That's the point," Lucy replied, displaying the final image, all of them at the foundation office, caught in an unexpected moment of laughter during their second meeting. The composition captured something none of them had noticed happening: the tentative formation of something new from the wreckage of what had been destroyed. "This is my family. Broken, complicated, healing." The silence that followed felt contemplative rather than tense. "It's brilliant work," Eleanor said finally, meaning it. "James would have been proud." Lucy's eyes shimmered briefly. "He always encouraged me to find the truth in my subjects," she said, "even when it wasn't pretty." "Especially then," Thomas added softly. "I'd like to include these in my summer program application," Lucy continued, her voice growing more confident. "With your permission, of course. I know they reveal things we might prefer to keep private." Eleanor considered this, their family's pain and redemption displayed for strangers' evaluation. Once, she would have reflexively refused, protecting the Blackwood reputation above all else. Now she recognized Lucy's work as both art and therapy, a processing of trauma that transcended privacy concerns. "You have my permission," she said, noting Vanessa's surprised glance. "Art should tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable." "Thank you," Lucy said simply, but her expression conveyed deeper gratitude, not just for permission, but for acknowledgement of her vision. Their dinner afterward was not without tension. Old habits and hurts surfaced in small ways: Eleanor's instinctive attempt to control the conversation, Vanessa's defensive reactions when money was mentioned, Thomas's tendency to placate rather than engage when disagreements arose. But beneath the awkwardness lay something new: willingness to acknowledge the discomfort rather than pretend it away. "I received the Foundation's first official donation today," Vanessa mentioned as they finished dessert. "Anonymous, $10,000. Eleanor exchanged a glance with Walter, whose slight nod confirmed her suspicion about the donor's identity. He had made the contribution himself, a vote of confidence in their collective endeavor. A promising start, Thomas said, refilling wine glasses, to what we're building. Speaking of building, Lucy interjected, setting down her fork with, nervous energy? I got accepted to the summer intensive program. I leave next month. Vanessa reached for her daughter's hand. We're so proud of you. The foundation will cover your expenses, Eleanor added, then caught herself. That is, if that's what you want. The choice is yours. Lucy's smile acknowledged Eleanor's effort to relinquish control. I'd like that, thank you. As they cleared the table together, another new practice, the work shared rather than delegated to staff, Eleanor found herself working alongside Vanessa in the kitchen, rinsing dishes before loading the dishwasher. Your health news is good, Vanessa said quietly, handing Eleanor a plate. I'm glad. Thank you. Eleanor accepted both the plate and the olive branch it represented. It gives me time to make amends, where possible. Vanessa nodded, her guard lowering slightly. James would have appreciated that. She hesitated, then added, he never stopped loving you, you know, even at his angriest. The simple statement pierced Eleanor's heart with both pain and comfort. I never stopped loving him either. I just forgot how to show it without conditions. They worked in silence for a moment, the running water filling the space between confessions. Lucy's photographs are powerful, Eleanor said finally. She has a gift for seeing beneath surfaces. She's been photographing everything since it all happened, Vanessa admitted. Says she's documenting our reconstruction. She shook her head slightly. Though I'm not sure that's the right word. You can't rebuild exactly what was before. No, Eleanor agreed. Nor would we want to. When they rejoined the others in the dining room, Thomas was telling Lucy about an exhibition he'd visited in New York, his enthusiasm for her medium clearly an attempt to connect with his niece's passion. Walter sat nearby, observing the family, interaction with the attentiveness that had made him an excellent attorney, and perhaps something more to Eleanor, though neither had acknowledged the subtle shift in their relationship. A toast, Eleanor suggested, raising her glass, to Lucy's success, and to new beginnings. As they echoed her words, she caught Lucy photographing the moment, preserving their imperfect healing for whatever came next. The empty safe upstairs no longer seemed a symbol of theft and betrayal, but of transformation. What had been taken had made space for what could grow. Later, as the evening wound down, Eleanor stood on the front porch beside Walter, watching Thomas help Lucy load her photography equipment into Vanessa's car. They're trying, Walter observed quietly. All of them. We all are, Eleanor replied. It's harder than I expected, letting go of control, of certainty. Yet you seem more at peace than I've seen you in years, he noted, his hand close to hers on the porch railing but not quite touching. Perhaps peace comes from acceptance rather than control, Eleanor said, surprising herself with the insight. Though don't quote me on that. I'd hate to damage my reputation as a control freak entirely. Walter's low chuckle warmed the evening air. Your secrets are safe with me, Eleanor. They always have been. As he spoke, Eleanor noticed a car driving slowly past the house for the second time that evening, a black sedan with tinted windows. Something about its deliberate pace raised her attorney's instincts, a prickle of awareness that felt like a distant warning. Everything all right? Walter asked, following her gaze. Eleanor forced her attention back to the present moment, to this fragile piece her family was constructing. Yes, she said, dismissing the unease. Everything's fine. But as the car turned the corner and disappeared from view, she couldn't quite shake the feeling that their tentative reconstruction remained vulnerable to forces they hadn't yet confronted, that the Blackwood past wasn't finished with them yet. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, addressed to Eleanor in unfamiliar handwriting. No return address, just a Phoenix, Arizona postmark. She found it nestled among routine correspondence, foundation proposals, medical bills, a note from Thomas about an upcoming lecture he thought she might enjoy. The mundane normalcy of the other mail made this plain white envelope seem ordinary, though something about its anonymity triggered Eleanor's long-honed instincts. She carried it to her study, setting her coffee beside the antique letter opener that had been Michael's. A gift on their 10th anniversary, back when she still believed his business dealings were merely shrewd rather than criminal. Strange how objects accumulated history, how they evolved from simple gifts into symbols of all we didn't know about the people we loved. Eleanor sliced the envelope cleanly, extracting a single folded page. The paper was common, the kind available at any office supply store, deliberately untraceable. The message, however, was unmistakably specific. Eleanor, I was Michael's partner in the Veracruz arrangement. I have documentation of your involvement, including your signature on the transfer agreements and your handwritten notes about structuring the transactions to avoid regulatory scrutiny. $500,000 wired to the enclosed account ensures my continued silence. You have 1 week. Victor Mercer attached was a grainy photograph of Eleanor with Michael, dated 1989, standing beside a man she vaguely remembered from a business dinner. Tall, with a distinctive scar above his right eyebrow. The Veracruz arrangement. Eleanor remembered it all too clearly now, though she'd managed to relegate it to the dusty corners of selective memory for decades. A series of offshore transfers that Michael had assured her were tax optimization strategies. She'd had doubts, had documented them in notes she believed had been destroyed, but ultimately she'd signed the papers. The first of many compromises that built the Blackwood fortune. Eleanor's hands remained steady even as her mind raced. Victor Mercer. The name stirred vague recognition, a business associate from Michael's early days, someone who had disappeared from their circle abruptly. Michael had mentioned him only in passing after that, always with a dismissive tone that suggested a falling out. Her instinct for self-preservation, honed through decades as a corporate attorney, immediately began. Constructing defenses. The statute of limitations had surely expired on most of those transactions. Plausible deniability. Her signature could have been coerced or misunderstood. The Blackwood Foundation's restitution work could mitigate public opinion. But Eleanor knew these were old patterns, the automatic calculations of a woman who had spent her life protecting the Blackwood name at all costs. The woman she was trying to become, the woman who had promised transparency to her family, required different considerations. As she contemplated her next move, her phone rang. Vanessa's name flashed on the screen, an unexpected midday call, from her daughter-in-law who typically communicated through carefully scheduled meetings or brief functional texts. Vanessa, Eleanor answered, setting the blackmail letter face down on her desk. Is everything all right? Yes, actually. Vanessa's voice carried an undercurrent of excitement she wasn't quite concealing. I just got off a call I thought you should know about. Oh? Eleanor reached for her coffee, finding it had already cooled. I've been offered a job, Vanessa said without preamble, directness being one of the few traits she and Eleanor genuinely shared. Financial director for the Hanover Arts Foundation in Seattle. Excellent salary, benefits, relocation package. Eleanor's mind struggled to shift from blackmail to this new development. Two crises, one threatening the past she'd tried to reconcile, one threatening the future they'd begun to build, colliding in a single morning. Congratulations, she managed, her tone measured. That sounds like an excellent opportunity. It is. A pause. They need an answer within 2 weeks. I'd start August 1st. 6 weeks from now, Eleanor calculated automatically. And Lucy's summer program in New York begins next month. Yes, that's part of what I need to figure out. Vanessa's voice turned cautious. It would mean moving, permanently, with Lucy after her program ends. The implication hung between them. Their fragile family reconstruction would effectively end. Long-distance reconciliation rarely succeeded. Eleanor knew this from the corporate mergers she'd overseen, let alone in the more delicate terrain of family healing. "Does Lucy know?" Eleanor asked, glancing at the blackmail letter again. "Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first." This new courtesy from Vanessa still felt strange, a tentative bridge neither fully trusted. Given everything with the foundation, with the family. Eleanor took a deep breath, making a decision that would have been unthinkable months before. "We should discuss this in person, all of us. Can you come over this evening? I have something I need to share with you as well. Is everything okay?" Vanessa's perceptiveness had always been sharp. "Not exactly," Eleanor admitted, "but it's something we should address together." After they disconnected, Eleanor sat motionless, staring at the blackmail letter. The old Eleanor would have handled this alone, paid the money, buried the threat, preserved the family's tenuous new peace at any cost. That Eleanor would have encouraged Vanessa to take the Seattle position, relieved to have the complication of genuine reconciliation removed to a safe distance. But the woman who had confronted her own mortality, who had been granted unexpected time to remake her life's meaning, recognized the test inherent in these twin challenges. This was the moment that would define whether their family's healing was genuine or merely performative. Eleanor reached for her phone again, sending a group text to Thomas, Vanessa, and Lucy. "Family meeting tonight, 7 p.m. Important matters to discuss. Please come." By evening, Eleanor had reviewed her options exhaustively. She'd researched Victor Mercer, finding sparse information, a minor mention in business journals from the 80s, a real estate transaction in Arizona 10 years ago, nothing recent. She'd calculated how quickly she could liquidate personal assets to pay the blackmail without touching foundation funds. She'd even drafted a careful explanation for her family that revealed enough to contextualize the threat without exposing the worst of her complicity. Her home, once a showcase of Blackwood prosperity, now felt like a stage set for the most important performance of her life. Eleanor arranged the study with careful consideration. The blackmail letter centered on the coffee table, chairs positioned for conversation rather than confrontation, no alcohol that might blur judgment, just a pot of strong coffee and a pitcher of water with fresh lemon. Vanessa arrived first, impeccably dressed as always, but with an energy that suggested both opportunity and apprehension. She carried a folder that likely contained details of the Seattle position. Vanessa had always prepared thoroughly for negotiations. "Whatever this is about," she said after hanging her coat, "it must be serious. Family meetings haven't exactly been our tradition." "Perhaps they should have been," Eleanor replied, gesturing toward the seating area. "Thank you for coming." Lucy and Thomas arrived together, having apparently coordinated their timing. Lucy's camera bag was conspicuously absent for once, a sign she viewed this as a participant rather than an observer. Thomas's posture showed the subtle changes from his therapy: straighter shoulders, more direct eye contact, less tendency to physically position himself as a buffer between potential conflicts. "Mom? Grandma? What's going on?" Lucy asked, glancing between her mother and grandmother with the perceptiveness that made her photography so insightful. "Multiple developments," Eleanor said, deciding transparency was their only path forward. "Your mother has received an excellent job offer in Seattle." Lucy's eyes widened. "Seattle? We're moving to Seattle?" She turned to Vanessa. "When were you going to tell me?" "I just found out today," Vanessa replied, her voice softening as it always did with Lucy. "I wanted to discuss it with everyone. Together." "But what about our family, the foundation?" Lucy turned back to Eleanor, accusation in her posture. "You'd just let us leave? After everything?" Eleanor felt the weight of Lucy's question. The old Eleanor would have manipulated this situation, used money, guilt, or the foundation to control Vanessa's choices. The woman she was trying to become, needed another approach. "It's your mother's decision," she said carefully. "And yours, given your age and your involvement in the foundation. But," she held up a hand as Lucy began to protest, "there's something else we need to address first, something that may affect all our choices." Eleanor picked up the blackmail letter, unfolding it with steady hands. "This arrived this morning." She passed it first to Vanessa, whose financial analyst's eye quickly absorbed the implications. Thomas read it next, his expression darkening. Lucy was the last to take it, her young face showing confusion that rapidly transformed into understanding. "This is blackmail," Vanessa stated flatly, her mind already calculating angles just as Eleanor's had done. "Yes, from someone who was part of Michael's business circle decades ago, threatening to expose my involvement in some of the more questionable financial arrangements." Thomas began pacing the room, a habit when processing difficult information. "We should call Detective Rivera," he said immediately. "And tell him what?" Eleanor countered. "That someone's threatening to expose my complicity in Michael's illegal activities? The very thing I've been trying to make amends for through the foundation?" "This is different," Vanessa argued. "This is extortion." Eleanor managed a brittle laugh. "The irony isn't lost on me. 3 months ago, I considered you the thief in this scenario." Vanessa flinched but held her ground. "The situations aren't comparable, aren't they? You took what you felt entitled to because of past wrongs. This man is doing the same." "So what are you going to do?" Thomas asked, stopping his pacing. To face her directly. "Pay him?" The question hung in the air. The expected response from the old Eleanor would have been yes, of course. Protect the family name at all costs. "I could," she admitted. "I have personal assets separate from the foundation that would cover it." "But that's just the first payment," Lucy said, demonstrating insight beyond her years. "People like this always come back for more." "Lucy's right," Vanessa added. "And this could expose everything. The foundation's work, the restitution, plans. Not to mention potential criminal charges," Thomas said grimly. "Even with the statute of limitations, there could be exceptions for ongoing conspiracy." Lucy, who had been examining the photograph attached to the letter, looked up, suddenly. "I know this man." Everyone turned to her in surprise. "From Dad's research," she continued, her voice growing more confident. "He's in the files I've been going through. Victor Mercer. Dad had a whole folder on him." Eleanor felt a chill. James was investigating Michael's former partners? "He was investigating everything," Lucy confirmed, "including this man. Dad thought he was the key to understanding where the Blackwood money really came from." An uncomfortable silence fell as this new information settled around them. James's posthumous presence seemed to fill the room, his research still unfolding consequences long after his death. Thomas moved to the window, his back to them for a moment before turning with newfound resolution. The uncertain, conflict-avoidant son was giving way to something stronger. "We need to make a decision as a family," he said firmly. "Pay the blackmail and protect the Blackwood name, or face whatever consequences come with the truth." Eleanor watched her son with a mixture of pride and melancholy. This was the man he might have been years earlier, had she not tacitly encouraged his deference to James, to Michael, to herself. "There's a third option," Vanessa said quietly, opening the folder she'd brought. "I take the Seattle job. Lucy and I disappear from the Blackwood orbit before the scandal hits." She looked directly at Eleanor. "You pay the blackmail, buy time, to prepare for eventual exposure. We all move on with separate lives." The suggestion hung in the air, a clean break, an escape route that part of Eleanor found tempting. Vanessa was offering her freedom from the complicated, painful work of genuine reconciliation. Lucy slammed her hand on the coffee table, startling them all. "No, that's not what Dad would have wanted. That's not what any of this has been for." Her outburst shifted the energy in the room. Lucy had often been an observer in family dynamics, despite being central to them. Now she claimed her voice with unmistakable conviction. "What would you suggest, Lucy?" Eleanor asked, studying her granddaughter's fierce expression. "We go to Detective Rivera together, show him the blackmail letter, explain everything." Lucy's gaze swept across each of them. "No more secrets." "That could mean criminal charges," Thomas warned, though his tone suggested he wasn't disagreeing. "It could mean jail," Eleanor added. Lucy's gaze didn't waver. "Grandma, you've spent your whole life protecting the Blackwood name. Where did that get us? Dad died angry and bitter. Mom stole from you. Uncle Thomas lied to everyone. I grew up in a family built on secrets." Her words cut through Eleanor's remaining defenses. In that moment, Lucy wasn't just James's daughter or Vanessa's child. She was the conscience the Blackwood family had long suppressed, the truth-teller they needed. "You're right," Eleanor said simply. "What?" Thomas and Vanessa spoke simultaneously, equally shocked. "Lucy's right." Eleanor gathered the blackmail materials, her decision crystallizing. No more secrets. No more protecting a legacy that doesn't deserve protection. Vanessa eyed her skeptically. "Just like that? You're willing to risk criminal charges, public humiliation, everything you've spent your life building?" "What have I actually built, Vanessa?" Eleanor asked, the question genuine rather than rhetorical. "A fortune based on questionable dealings, a family that fractured under the weight of secrets, a reputation built on carefully managed appearances rather than substance." She shook her head. "I was granted borrowed time. I intend to use it, better than I used the decades before." Vanessa seemed temporarily at a loss for words, studying Eleanor as if seeing her for the first time. "If we do this," she finally said, "my job offer will still be there," Eleanor finished. "And if you choose to take it, we'll find a way to maintain what we've built. Family doesn't require proximity to function." "You'd let us go?" Vanessa sounded genuinely surprised, and Eleanor recognized the test within the question. "I can't let you do anything, Vanessa. That was always my mistake." Eleanor met her daughter-in-law's gaze directly. "You and Lucy are free to choose your own paths. That's what freedom from the Blackwood legacy truly means." The room fell silent again. But the quality of the silence had changed, tense expectation giving way to thoughtful consideration. "If we're going to Detective Rivera," Thomas said finally, stepping forward with newfound authority, "we should be strategic. Have Walter present as legal counsel. Bring all of James's research to show we're cooperating fully. And we should decide about Seattle after this is resolved," Lucy added, looking at her mother. "One crisis at a time." Vanessa nodded slowly. "Agreed." She turned to Eleanor. "I never expected this from you." "Nor did I," Eleanor admitted. "But perhaps that's the point. We've all been confined by expectations, our own and others." Thomas cleared his throat, his new assertiveness still awkward but strengthening. "Then I suggest we call Detective Rivera now. Together." Eleanor reached for her phone, aware that this simple action represented the dismantling of decades of protective barriers, the final surrender of the control that had defined her existence. Yet she felt strangely unburdened, as if setting down a weight she hadn't fully acknowledged carrying. As she dialed, she watched her family, Thomas standing straighter than she could remember seeing him, Vanessa's calculating mind visibly shifting toward collaboration rather than self-protection, Lucy's face showing the fierce determination she'd inherited from both her parents and, though she might not recognize it, from Eleanor herself. "Detective Rivera? It's Eleanor Blackwood. I need to report an attempted blackmail, and some other matters you should be aware of. Could you come to my home this evening? My family and I have important information to share." As she concluded the call, Eleanor met each of their eyes in turn, Whatever comes next, legal consequences, public exposure, family separations, we face it in truth rather than deception. Lucy slipped her ever-present camera from her bag, capturing the moment. Four faces united in apprehension and resolve, about to step into uncertain territory together. For the exhibition, she explained softly, I'm calling it the test. Detective Rivera arrived within the hour, his expression shifting from professional concern to deeper interest as Eleanor explained the situation. Walter joined them shortly after, summoned by Thomas with a succinct text that belied the complexity of what awaited him. The night stretched long as statements were taken, documents reviewed, James's research examined. Lucy's summer program acceptance letter sat unopened on the side table. Vanessa's Seattle job offer remained in its folder, a decision postponed, but not forgotten. Near midnight, as Rivera gathered his materials and prepared to leave, he paused, in the foyer. Ms. Blackwood, he said quietly, I've been a detective for 20 years. I've seen families destroy each other over much less than what yours has endured. Eleanor waited, sensing he had more to say. What you're doing, facing this together, choosing truth over protection, it's unusual, brave even. He glanced toward the study where Thomas, Vanessa, and Lucy remained, voices low but steady as they spoke with Walter about next steps. Whatever legal consequences come, remember that. Thank you, Detective, Eleanor replied, finding unexpected comfort in his assessment. After both Rivera and Walter departed, promising to reconvene the next day, the family gathered once more, in the study. Exhaustion lined every face, but beneath it ran a current of something Eleanor couldn't immediately identify. We should get some rest, she suggested. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. As Vanessa and Lucy prepared to leave, Thomas lingered. The new confidence he'd displayed throughout the evening remained, but tempered now with reflection. I've spent my life avoiding conflict, he said, once they were alone. Trying to keep peace at any cost, but tonight. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Tonight felt different, like we were finally fighting for something worthwhile, instead of just preventing collapse. Eleanor nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. Truth is harder than deception in the moment, but perhaps easier to live with in the end. Is that what you're doing now, Mom? Choosing the truth that's easier to live with? The question wasn't accusatory, but genuinely curious. Eleanor considered it carefully. I'm choosing the truth that might allow us to truly live at all, she said finally, rather than merely survive behind walls of protection. Thomas embraced her then, a genuine, unhesitating connection that felt new between them. As he departed, Eleanor remained in her study, surrounded by the evidence of the past they were finally confronting and the future they might yet build. The blackmail letter still lay on the coffee table, its threat diminished now that it had been brought into the light. Eleanor picked it up one last time, seeing it not as a danger but as an opportunity, the catalyst that had forced them to decide what kind of family they truly wanted to be. She thought of Vanessa's job offer, of Lucy's art program, of Thomas's newfound voice. A year ago, she would have seen these as threats to her control, challenges to the family structure she maintained. Now she recognized them as individual paths that might, with care and intention, remain connected even as they diverged. Eleanor Blackwood had spent her life believing that family meant control, that love required proximity and compliance. Now, in what she had once thought were her final months, she was learning that genuine family might survive the very freedom she had always feared giving. It was, she reflected as she finally turned out the lights, the most difficult and worthy test of her borrowed time. 1 year later, the Harrington Gallery buzzed with the well-dressed crowd typical of exhibition openings. Crystal champagne flutes clinked Conversations ebbed and flowed, and spotlights illuminated the photographs that lined the pristine white walls. At the center of it all stood Lucy Blackwood, now 18, poised in a simple black dress that contrasted with her confident smile as she answered questions about her first professional showing. Family portraits, the archaeology of silence. Eleanor watched from near the entrance, a glass of sparkling water in hand, pride warming her chest as she observed her granddaughter. At 17, when their journey began, Lucy had been talented but raw, her photography fueled primarily by anger and confusion. Now, she displayed the composure and insight of someone much older, her artistic eye refined by both technical training and emotional growth. The exhibition's centerpiece waited under a cloth at the far end of the gallery, to be revealed during Lucy's scheduled remarks. Nervous? Walter appeared at Eleanor's side, offering a glass of champagne to replace her water. For her? No, she's a natural. Eleanor accepted the glass with a smile, allowing herself this small celebration. For myself, terribly. Walter chuckled, the sound warm and familiar now after months of their cautious, evolving relationship. The formidable Eleanor Blackwood, anxious about an art show? About seeing my family's history displayed for public consumption, she corrected, though her tone remained light. About facing Michael's former partners in the audience. About Vanessa's return to Seattle tomorrow. She took a careful sip of champagne. About you being here with me, perhaps. The last admission surprised them both. Eleanor had grown more direct over the past year, but references to their personal relationship remained rare and precious. I wouldn't be anywhere else, Walter replied simply, his hand brushing hers briefly. Eleanor surveyed the gallery, noting how different her life had become since Victor Mercer's blackmail attempt had forced their family to choose truth over protection. The legal consequences had been significant but manageable. Financial penalties, community service, a deferred prosecution agreement that acknowledged her cooperation. The public exposure had been its own punishment. The Blackwood name, once synonymous with financial prominence, now carried complicated associations. Yet standing here, watching Lucy's triumph, Eleanor felt lighter than she had in decades. The burden of secrets lifted, replaced by the more straightforward weight of accountability. Across the room, Thomas chatted animatedly with Dr. Chen, who had become something of a family friend. Beside them stood Adrian, the literature professor from Thomas's university, who had begun as a colleague and evolved into something much more meaningful. Eleanor observed her son's ease with his partner. The awkward, conflict-avoidant Thomas gradually replaced by a man who had found his voice, and more surprisingly, his laughter. He'd published his first major academic paper 6 months earlier, a thoughtful examination of how historical narratives shape family dynamics across generations. Eleanor had recognized elements of their own story in his work, though artfully disguised in academic language and historical examples. Thomas was finally telling his own story, creating his own legacy distinct from his father's financial empire or his brother's tragic absence. The gallery door opened, drawing Eleanor's attention to Vanessa's entrance. Her daughter-in-law turned heads in her elegant gray pantsuit, her professional success evident in both her attire and her confident stance. The Seattle Foundation had agreed to a remote work arrangement for the first 6 months after her relocation, allowing her to split time between cities, preserving both her career advancement and the family's fragile new connections. That arrangement had evolved into monthly visits and weekly video conferences, a rhythm that suited Vanessa's independence while acknowledging their shared commitments. Eleanor? Vanessa nodded in greeting as she approached, their relationship now characterized by respect, if not the warmth of conventional in-laws. The gallery looks wonderful. Lucy couldn't have asked for a better venue. The Hanover Foundation's connection didn't hurt, Eleanor acknowledged, referencing Vanessa's employer, which had provided partial funding for the exhibition. She has her father's eye for truth. And her grandmother's determination, Vanessa added with the ghost of a smile. There was an unspoken recognition between them, the qualities they had once weaponized against each other now appreciated as strengths that had helped Lucy flourish. Their complicated detente had proven more durable than either had expected, sustained by their shared commitment to Lucy and, increasingly, by genuine if cautious respect. "How was your flight?" Walter asked Vanessa, smoothly maintaining conversation. "On time, for once. I came straight from the airport." She glanced around the gallery, her gaze lingering on the photographs. Her work has evolved significantly since the Foundation exhibit. "She's found her voice," Eleanor observed, watching, as Lucy guided a small group of patrons through the early photographs in the sequence. The exhibition told a chronological story, beginning with stark images of conflict and betrayal, including the iconic photograph of Eleanor's empty safe, and progressing toward more complex compositions that explored reconciliation without sugarcoating its challenges. Lucy had captured moments none of them remembered being photographed. Thomas sitting alone on a park bench, his expression caught between grief and relief. Vanessa working late at her foundation desk, determination and fatigue equally present. In her posture, Eleanor and Walter walking through autumn leaves, shot from behind, their hands not quite touching but clearly drawn toward each other. "She sees everything," Thomas said, joining their small group with Adrian beside him. "Always has." "A quality that made her teenage years particularly challenging," Vanessa remarked with dry humor. Detective Rivera arrived last, standing somewhat awkwardly in a suit rather than his usual work attire. He had remained connected to the Blackwood family through the legal proceedings that followed their disclosure of Michael's business dealings and Eleanor's involvement. What had begun as a professional relationship had gradually evolved into something resembling friendship, particularly with Thomas, whose interest in narrative and truth resonated with Rivera's investigative perspective. "Everyone's here," Thomas noted, checking his watch. "Lucy's scheduled to speak in 10 minutes. Eleanor felt a flutter of anticipation. The exhibition represented more than Lucy's artistic debut. It was the public culmination of their family's painful evolution, the transformation of private trauma into shared truth. The Blackwood secrets, once guarded so jealously, now hung illuminated on gallery walls, transformed into art that transcended simple exposure. "I should find my seat," Eleanor said, aware that Lucy had arranged reserved seating at the front for family members. "Will you join me?" Walter offered his arm, a gentlemanly gesture that would have seemed performative from anyone else but felt genuine from him. Together they moved through the crowd, acknowledging greetings from various patrons. Eleanor recognized several of Michael's former business associates, some who had cooperated with authorities following the revelations about Blackwood Financial, others who had distanced themselves but appeared curious about. This exhibition traces that journey, from betrayal to reconciliation, from silence to truth. It's not a neat narrative. There are still unresolved questions, lingering pain, moments of disconnection. Her gaze swept across her family in the front row. But there's also genuine healing, unexpected growth, and new forms of connection none of us could have imagined. Eleanor felt tears threatening, a public display of emotion that would once have mortified her. Beside her, Walter discreetly offered a handkerchief, which she accepted without embarrassment. Thomas reached across the empty seat between them to squeeze her hand briefly, a gesture of support that required no words. After Lucy's formal remarks concluded, the crowd dispersed throughout the gallery, examining the photographs with renewed interest. Critics huddled in corners, making notes. Patrons approached Lucy with questions and compliments. Through it all, Eleanor remained seated, needing a moment to absorb the impact of seeing their collective journey so artfully distilled. "She's remarkable," Walter said quietly beside her. "James would be proud." "Yes," Eleanor agreed, finding unexpected comfort in the thought. "Though perhaps not initially. he would have struggled with the exposure, as I did. Yet, here you are, Walter observed, supporting her choice to make public what was once so carefully hidden. Eleanor considered this. Perhaps that's the most significant change of all. Learning that truth, however painful, creates more possibility than secrets ever could. Eventually, they rose to join the reception, accepting congratulations on Lucy's behalf from patrons who recognized them from the photographs. Eleanor moved through these interactions with a grace she had always possessed, but which now seemed authentic rather than performative. As the formal portion of the evening concluded, the family gathered near James's portrait, claiming a moment of private communion amid the public event. Lucy had arranged for them to have the gallery to themselves briefly after the main crowd departed. "He would have been proud of you," Eleanor told Lucy, standing before the centerpiece. "Not just for your talent, but for your courage." "I know," Lucy said simply, her confidence neither arrogant nor forced. "I've made peace with that." Vanessa checked her watch, the practical considerations of her dual life never entirely absent. "The movers finish packing my apartment tomorrow. Last boxes to Seattle." Over the past year, she had maintained 2 residences, a small apartment in Boston for her monthly visits, and her main home in Seattle. The arrangement, originally intended as temporary, had proven surprisingly sustainable. "But you'll be back?" "For the Foundation quarterly meeting," Thomas said, his tone making it a statement rather than a question. "And Lucy's fall semester begins next month." "And you'll all visit us," Lucy added, including Walter in her glance. "We have a guest room with a view of Puget Sound, and I need new subjects for my Seattle series." Eleanor smiled at her family, marveling at how they had transformed. The theft that had begun their journey now seemed like a distant catalyst, rather than the defining crisis she'd initially perceived. "I have something for each of you," Lucy said, retrieving a flat package. From behind the reception desk, "Advance copies of the exhibition book. There's a personal note for each of you on the inside cover." She distributed the beautifully bound volumes, watching as they discovered her handwritten messages. Eleanor opened hers with careful fingers, reading words that blurred slightly through tears. "To Grandma Eleanor, who taught me that it's never too late to choose a different path. Your borrowed time changed all of us. Thank you for the courage to face the truth. Love?" Lucy Eleanor closed the book, holding it against her chest for a moment. "Thank you," she said simply, words inadequate for the emotion behind them. As the evening wound down, Walter approached Eleanor as she stood before a photograph near the end of the sequence, a striking image of herself at her desk, examining old family records, her expression caught between regret and resolution. "Lucy captured your essence," Walter observed. "Determined, resilient, stubborn, set in my ways," Eleanor countered with a small smile. "Perhaps, but also capable of extraordinary change." Walter turned to face her, his expression uncharacteristically nervous. "Which is why I've been gathering my courage to ask you something." Eleanor studied him, this man who had stood beside her through decades of triumph and tragedy, who had known many of her secrets yet had chosen to remain, who had, over the past year, gradually shifted from trusted advisor to something much more personal. "I've been thinking," Walter continued, his voice dropping slightly, "that life is unpredictable and time, borrowed or otherwise, shouldn't be wasted." He reached for her hand, a gesture both formal and intimate. "Eleanor Blackwood, would you consider having dinner with me next Saturday? Not as your attorney, not as a foundation board member, as a date." A small, surprised laugh escaped her. "Are you asking me on a date, Walter Simmons?" "I believe I am." His smile was nervous, but genuine. "It's taken me 30 years to work up the courage." Eleanor's own smile widened. "Borrowed time has a way of clarifying priorities, doesn't it?" She squeezed his hand gently. "Yes, Walter. I would very much like to have dinner with you." The simplicity of the exchange belied its significance. In accepting, Eleanor acknowledged another transformation. From a woman defined by her roles as widow, mother, and attorney to someone capable of new beginnings, even at 69. As they prepared to leave, Thomas approached with Adrian, both carrying their exhibition books. "Lucy wants to take us all to dinner at that new place by the waterfront," he said. "To celebrate." "All of us?" Eleanor confirmed, glancing toward Vanessa, who stood examining the final photograph in the sequence. "Family dinner," Thomas nodded. "Her request." Eleanor felt a wave of gratitude that nearly overwhelmed her. A year ago, the idea of a voluntary family dinner would have seemed impossible, a forced, tense obligation at best. Now it represented something else entirely, chosen connection rather than demanded loyalty. "We'll join you shortly," she told Thomas. "I just need a moment." As the others headed toward the exit, Eleanor turned once more to face James's portrait. The son she'd lost had given them all an unexpected gift, the catalyst for truth that had transformed their broken family into something new. Not perfect, not without scars, but authentic in a way the Blackwood name had never been before. "Thank you," she whispered to his image. For what exactly? She wasn't entirely sure. For his anger that had exposed necessary truths. For Lucy, who carried forward his perceptive vision. For the chain of events his death had set in motion that had ultimately led to healing rather than further fracture. Walter waited patiently at a distance, allowing her this private moment. When she turned back to him, her expression was peaceful. "Ready?" he asked. "Yes," she said, meaning it in ways that extended far beyond their dinner plans. As they rejoined, the family waiting outside, Eleanor looked at each of them, Thomas standing tall beside Adrian, no longer defined by what he wasn't. Vanessa, independent yet connected, no longer trapped by resentment. Lucy, her camera still in hand even now, transforming their reality into art with each shutter click. And herself, Eleanor Blackwood, once defined by control and appearance, now finding her way toward authenticity. The woman who had received a terminal diagnosis that wasn't hers, who had been granted time she hadn't expected, who had chosen to use that time to face truths she'd spent decades avoiding. "To borrowed time," she murmured, raising her glass, in a private toast as they settled at their restaurant table. "And what we choose to do with it." Around her, her family continued, changed but intact, separate but connected, their futures unwritten but facing forward together. The Blackwood legacy, once measured in financial success and social position, now rested in something less tangible but infinitely more valuable: the courage to begin again, even when the path forward remained uncertain. Eleanor caught Lucy photographing her in that moment of reflection, another image for some future exhibition, perhaps. She didn't mind. There was something freeing about being seen clearly, about abandoning the exhausting work of curating a perfect appearance. Later, as they walked along the waterfront after dinner, the night air cool against their faces, Walter's hand found hers. Behind them, Lucy's camera clicked softly, capturing the moment. "Another for the collection?" Eleanor asked her granddaughter with a smile. "For the next series," Lucy confirmed. "I'm calling it What Remains." The title resonated with Eleanor, not what was lost or taken, but what endured beyond the stripping away of pretense and protection, what remained after the borrowed time had been fully claimed and consciously lived. It was, she reflected as they continued their walk beneath stars partially obscured by city lights, more than enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.